What is up, everybody? It is Dives, Mr. Crockbot on Twitter. This is the Blue Root Pod. First things first, the Blue Root Pod can be found on iTunes and Spotify. Check us out there. Please give us a 5-star rating. Truly helps us grow our brand and give you, the viewer, the best show possible. The Blue Root Pod can also now be found on our YouTube channel. It's under the Blue Root Pod playlist. We are getting close to 1,000 subscribers, which is absolutely crazy. All right, Tyson, let's get fired up. Please give a huge welcome to our guest, Tyson Quibell, our resident Flyers analyst here at the Painted Lines. If you're a hockey diehard, follow him on Twitter at Quibell Tyson, and check out his upcoming article on the Flyers prospects coming out later this afternoon. You can find that article and all of Tyson's other write-ups on the NHL and the Flyers at thepaintedlines.com. How you doing, Tyson?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, buddy. Flyers are doing well here. The Flyers season could not have gone any better after 2 games. Schedule be damned. You start off in the Czech Republic, then you come home for a game, and now you do a West Coast trip. What's the deal with that, man?
I don't know. It's weird. NHL scheduling is frequently strange in this regard, but this is one of the strangest beginnings to the season that I've seen. So it is mildly surprising, actually, that the Flyers have been as successful as they have been so far because of it. We'll see next game on Saturday in Vancouver if that continues, but up until now, they're looking pretty good. Like, this doesn't seem to be affecting them yet.
Yeah, you look across the pond and, all these teams play 4 or 5 games. The Flyers have only played 2. All right, so the Flyers are 2-0 with W's versus the Devils and the Blackhawks. Like you said, Tyson, they travel to Vancouver for the next game on Saturday night. What has gone right for the Philadelphia Flyers this season?
Man, so they are playing what I like to call Alain Vigneault hockey, Alain Vigneault being their coach. They're really well structured defensively, especially. And I know that's sometimes been a bit of an issue in the past under Dave Haxtell teams. And so under Vigneault, you've seen like a very clear structure, even in terms of penalty kill. His strategy is like you as you watch the Flyers play, you are kind of at this point very regularly able to see the coaching strategy of the coach present and what his players are doing. And not to say that didn't happen with Haxtell, but there was moments in time when you would kind of look out and be like, it just kind of looks like every line does their own thing and every guy kind of does their own thing. And there seemed to be lack of cohesion as a unit. And already you're seeing like player buy-in across the board. He tends to resonate really well with veterans. And so the Flyers brought in a lot of veterans, and with these veterans he's brought in, I think that they've very much bought into the system so far. And so that's looked really good. The young guys, even Millman and Konecny and other guys like Konecny, who's obviously been in the league for a while, and Provorov, they also just look super energized. Like Konecny is just buzzing right now. Provorov is buzzing. And so just as a whole, man, they look like a team that is playing with a high energy game, and yet at the same time are playing in a structured way to the point where it's leading to on-ice success. So some of the advanced stats analytics guys you can follow on Twitter. There's a ton of them, but they were releasing early numbers, and Flyers were leading in all advanced stats categories basically so far after 2 games. And I know it's only 2 games, but that's a really positive sign.
That's crazy, man. And I think the key word that you brought up there is cohesion, because that was, or lack thereof, last year, man. They didn't have any cohesion. They were inconsistent across the board all last year. But all right, any conversation begins and ends with about the Flyers with Carter Hart. I saw that Carter Hart is the 8th goalie in NHL history, 21 and younger, to win his first 2 games of the year. No other previous streak extended through 3 games. What are your thoughts on Carter Hart through 2 games?
I mean, he's coming as advertised after 2 games. The fact that he got a shutout in his second one, and it wasn't an easy shutout either. I don't know if you saw that glove save that he made, where he stretched across the crease, and you just got to see his athleticism there. And that's the thing with him. Like, I scouted him when he was 16 and 17 in the WHL, and when I watched him then, he had the athleticism as well. He was smaller than he is now, but what always to me stood out was his demeanor. If you're a goalie, you got to be really, really calm almost all the time, no matter what's going on. So whether you've let in 4 goals and maybe 2 are your fault or not, like, you're not sustainably successful for a long period of time as a goaltender, more often than not, if your emotions get the best of you when it comes to goals against. And unless you're a guy like Patrick Waugh and you use that energy to beat up the opposition, or as Flyers fans are familiar with, Ron Hextall. But in terms of the modern goalie especially, it's that calm demeanor. And so he just has that, and he's showing that. He's just unflappable. It's like he goes in and he acts like he's been doing this his whole life, which I guess he probably has, but not at the pros. And it's great to see that combination of actually being like a structured, stylistic goalie where he knows his angles. He knows how to cut off his angles for being a smaller goalie for NHL standards, and yet his athleticism's coming out. So he's showing a huge amount of confidence. And obviously, time will tell in terms of how well he'll be able to sustain it. But I'll say this, as long as his defensive core is playing structured like they are so far, his ability to have success is going to go up significantly.
Yeah. The first thing that stands out about Carter Hart to me is his agility. It's just elite, man. I mean, he's just so quick.
Yeah.
All right. So, Alain Vigneault, what are some of your impressions of the Flyers' first-year head coach so far?
Man, it's funny when you're like, yeah, this is what Alain Vigneault teams are, and this is exactly what they are. What you've seen so far, especially in the first year, he gets more out of his teams in his first year of coaching than almost any coach in the league, minus Ken Hitchcock, who is out of a job because he doesn't last longer than a year or two, usually in a coaching role. And now the difference between these two, between Hitchcock and Vigneault, who both could potentially be Hall of Famers. Hitchcock, I believe, actually already is one. Is the fact that Vigneault is structured. He's pretty intense, but he tends to balance it well overall. So he's able to motivate veterans, especially, and in the past he's tended to favor veterans over younger players, and in doing so convinces the younger players to buy into the system that he's building. And so usually it's a more defensive first system. It's attempts at puck control and possession. But his teams are always successful, usually tied into as well the performance of goalies. So when he was at the Rangers, he relied very heavily on Henrik Lundqvist. And so there's this thought that he's going to have to do the same with the Flyers and Carter Hart. And that was one of my concerns with the hire coming in was, okay, if this is what Vigneault teams historically are, you're going to rely on a 21-year-old to be this new kind of Lundqvist guy to pull this off for you. Not sure how that's going to go, but so far it seems to be working, and I think it does help that there is some steadiness here in terms of each player on defense, especially like actually playing with someone that is a good match for their skill set. So he doesn't have these like Gostisbehere Provorov pairing that have been tried in the past, where both guys just want to run and gun a lot, and there's no one to step back and play defense. And he seems to have balanced that well, and he's playing people in good roles too. Like it's making sense so far. So one of the reasons why I gave the Flyers I think they're going to make the playoffs rating is earlier in the season was because it's a Vigneault first year team. It's just what he does. So.
You have to be super impressed. And I know it's a super small sample size, but here are some like quick stats. The Flyers are third in the NHL in the power play this year at 43%. Last year, they were 23rd in the NHL. In the penalty kill so far, they were 6th worst in the NHL last year. This year, they were 10th best. So, I mean, you have to be super impressed, especially on the defensive end, because that is exactly where they were just gutted all year last season. We have to talk about Travis Konecny. On our previous Blue Root pod, you, Tyson, wrote in Konecny as the breakout star for the Flyers this year. You absolutely nailed it after 2 games. 3 goals, 2 assists in the first 2. What are your impressions from Travis Konecny so far?
Man, I think the thing that I've seen in his game this year that's different is he just seems to be more inclined towards offense. Like it's almost like confidence has grown in that area. That's just what he looks like. Because the tools have always been there for him. Like in junior when he played, he put up a high number of points, and you saw an offensive ability to him. When the Flyers drafted him, they didn't think they were just drafting a third-line guy that can score here and there and throw some hits. They looked at him and saw somebody that could score some goals and contribute to possession in the offensive zone. And he's always had really good underlying numbers in terms of possession and things like that. And so It just was potentially a matter of, miscast at times, like being asked to be in a third line role or being asked to play less minutes than perhaps he should have been under Hackstall. And now they have him firmly cemented playing between 15 and 17 minutes a night, which is really good to start the year especially. And we're just seeing this confidence in him. I mean, some of the goals he scored, that first goal in home opener is incredible. You saw his skill on the backhand, and then later on, you saw him use his forechecking ability in the second game to throw some hits and use like the momentum in the offensive zone to crash the net. And you're still getting to see all the things that you love about his game. It's still there. But we're seeing just this new level of confidence from him in the offensive zone. And it's potentially the new coach, honestly. And the fact he's being given opportunities that he hasn't been given in the past. It's crazy what opportunity to play with skilled players on the regular will do, not only for confidence, but for statistics.
And we have to talk a little bit about the defense too, because a lot of it's Carter Hart. I mean, he has been absolutely brilliant through 2 games, but we also have a guy named Ivan Provorov. 1 goal, 2 assists. Just seems to be really blossoming right now. What have you liked from Ivan Provorov through 2 games?
Man, his skating has always been elite. And I feel like he's using it more this season. So under Hackstall, it looked like a lot of times you would see these flashes of his offensive ability. And he put up good numbers his first 2 years in the league. Last year was a really rough year for him, but, it was for a number of players on the Flyers. But for him in the past, it oftentimes looked like rather than carry the puck into the offensive zone or make a pinch, he was always just thinking safe. And I think he was probably being coached in that direction. Like, that's the biggest assumption that I can think of here is that, it might be like, oh man, he could make a move around this guy. It's a little risky, but if he does, he can open up a winger on the side of the net and set him up for a good scoring opportunity. And instead, he would be more likely to dump the puck in real quick or pass it off to his partner. And so far this year, we've seen the opposite of him. It's like someone just giving him the green light and said, hey man, let's just go. And so that I'm assuming some of that has to do with just there being a higher veteran presence on the blue line this year, where he might actually feel less of a weight than he's felt in the past of needing to be defensively conscious. And some of that's going to come, like his defensive numbers haven't been great per se over the years. His underlying numbers defensively haven't been amazing, but they've not been terrible either. So I think they could increase as well. But anyway, in general, like just watching him fly, man, like some of these scoring chances and abilities, like I've seen him right in the crease already this year, which as a defenseman, that's a little bit rare here and there, but he seems to have the green light to just go, and we're seeing the effects of that, which is really good.
Awesome stuff. All right, so it's only 2 games. On the previous Blue Root pod, I made you give your guess if the Flyers are going to make the playoffs. I want your first impression to see if has anything really changed. 0 through 10, 0 being zero confidence, 10 being an absolute lock. How confident are you that the Flyers make the playoffs? Has that changed at all?
I think I gave him a 7.
Yeah.
Before. I'm putting them up to a 7.5.
All right, love it.
So, and there's a number of reasons for that, but one being like obviously like what we've seen so far is a really small sample size, right?
Yep.
Like we've seen 2 games, and so most people would say 20 to 25 games gives you the sample size of both underlying numbers and counting stats to say, okay, this makes sense. Like this pitcher makes sense, and this is where they're headed and going. So, but the fact that they have had such a good start, they have been so dominant, and Hart has looked so good so far in the midst of, starting the season in a different country and things like that. And winning the first 2, I think the probability increases a little bit. So I still would put them in the bubble category, and that could change though. I mean, the Penguins in their division, Malkin's out for a month, and then their third line center Nick Bjugstad's out for a month. They have a huge hole to fill. They've had a rough start. Crosby's going to have to carry that team again, and they've had some losing games for sure. So it's not as though the division is like stacking up the way everyone thought either. So it's wide open, and it's showing to be wide open and will be for the foreseeable future.
That is Tyson Quibell. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Quibell Tyson. All right, let's talk some Flyers prospects. We got a few today. Let's lead off with Jay O'Brien. He's a 5'11", 19-year-old center. from Massachusetts. He was the 19th overall selection in the 2018 draft. What can you tell us about Jay O'Brien so far this year, man?
Man, he's been killing it so far. So the part of his story that we've kind of mentioned a little bit before, but he played NCAA last year, I believe, at Providence, and did not do well. Started the year injured and only played 25 games, had like 5 points and 2 goals, and just did not look good confidence-wise, and didn't seem to really have the confidence of his coaches as a first-year player. And so he decided to transfer, but in NCAA hockey, when you transfer, how it works is that you have to take a year off in between. And so for him, he needed to decide what league to play in before he goes and plays at Boston University. And so he decided to play in the BC Hockey League, which is in British Columbia in Canada, a tier 2 junior league. And it's pretty decent. I mean, there's been a high number of NCAA players that have come out of there. It's a big feeder for that. A lot of guys that are in the NHL now started their careers there. And so for him, it was, he needed to go back and dominate, and he has. He's got 17 points in 10 games so far. He's got some games this weekend. He's leading them offensively. He's got a leadership role on the team, and so he's being looked to for that. The V's, his team, the Penticton V's, they have a fun name. They are 10-0 so far this year. They're undefeated. So he's been a big part of that. And so this is exactly what Flyers fans want to see from him. It's still going to be a few years before you see him, but in a season like this, he's on pace for, over 70 points in 50 games. Like, that's huge. And that's what they need. And that's what his confidence needs before he makes the jump to Boston University next year.
Love it. Flyers fans, make sure you keep an eye out for Jay O'Brien. Next up, we got Mason Millman. Flyers took Mason with the 103rd selection in the 2019 NHL draft. 6'1", 175-pound, 18-year-old defenseman from Canada. Dude, what is going on with Mason this year?
Well, he is on the polar opposite scale.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So on the piece that I wrote, and I'm going to do this on the regular, hopefully as a weekly segment, I'll talk about the good and the bad, and different prospects will show up in different places. And so O'Brien is definitely on the high part of the good part, and Millman is on the lower part of the bad part. So Millman plays on the Saginaw Spirit in the OHL, and he was a little bit of a surprise for being picked in the 6th round to me. I guess any player could get picked in the 6th round realistically, but I wasn't a huge fan of the pick at the time. But some scouts and others that I've kind of interacted with, they sent me some data and looked at some data and saw there were some pretty good underlying numbers that I hadn't seen about his game. And so I was like, hey, he's basically posed for a good season this year. Well, he's been abysmal at best. So 9 games in, he has 1 goal, no assists. In his first year after being drafted, and he's been, and the thing is that his team's best defenseman, Bodie Wild, got injured in the New York Islanders camp, and so he's getting treatment in New York, and so he's not even back with the team. So there was a wide open opportunity for him to pick up those minutes, and he hasn't. He's been replaced by a rookie. So his overall game has just seemingly been lacking. Offensively speaking, like, Saginaw's not a bad team, so one of the first things I always look at is like, oh my goodness, he only has a goal? Like, is his team that bad? They're a 500 team. Okay, so they're not great, but they're not bad. And then I start looking at their roster, and they have a guy that's ranked top 10 in the draft for this coming year and is considered to be a potential superstar offensive talent, and he's putting up numbers. So everything's kind of pointing in the direction of, like, there's pieces there. His game has just not come a long ways, and things are suffering. His defensive game's suffering as well. So it's only 9 games in. So like I said earlier, your sample size, you want to be closer to 20 to 25. But, man, that's not a good start. I think he has got a negative 12 goal differential when he's on the ice. And yeah, so nice. Time will tell. Hopefully he can turn that around.
Yeah, hopefully Mason Millman will get it together. That's not good, dude. All right, let's talk about Pascal Leberge, 21-year-old, 6'1" center from Canada. Give Flyers fans an update on Pascal Leberge.
Yeah, I wouldn't even put him in the bad quarter category. I feel bad for him category.
Okay.
So if you've as a Flyers fan followed his saga, he was drafted years ago, and like hockey prospects, they stay in the system. He was a 2nd rounder though, and so The year he got drafted, he kind of looked like a pretty solid second or third line center at the NHL level. That was what many people thought his potential was. And I agreed with that sentiment 100%, that that's where he was headed, and that's what that was going to look like. And then he started getting these pretty crazy injuries. There's a really horrific video of him getting hit in the Quebec League in junior, and he got a really bad concussion. And it's almost like that, he never seemingly got over that and back into the developmental cycle in a positive manner that teams thought. And so last year he made the jump to the pros, and he did make Lehigh, and he played 15 games, but he got injured again and missed most of the year. And so I believe he's 22 now, and he did not make the Phantoms. So he tried. They've had a part of that is because they've had prospects like Farabee and Morgan Frost that are going to be playing for them this year, and they brought in some veterans, a handful of them that are really successful at the AHL level. But man, it's sad to see. So he got assigned to the Reading Royals in the East Coast Hockey League, and that's where he'll be starting. So it's not a situation where I'm saying we need to just give up on him, but it's a situation I just say is sad, because it's not as though he hasn't put in the work to help him get in a position to succeed and be a decent professional player and potentially make the NHL. It's just been these injuries, and you just hate to see it. So my hope is that for him, he doesn't take this demotion as hey, you have no chance, but as an opportunity to dominate. I think he could be the first line center down there for a little bit, and as soon as there's an injury, get called up and stick. He still managed 5 goals in 15 games, so that's about a 20-goal pace actually in the AHL. So he has some talent, he has some potential, but you just feel bad for the kid.
For sure. That is Tyson Quibell. Follow him on Twitter at Quibell Tyson. Any last comments before we wrap this up?
Man, looking forward to seeing them play Vancouver coming up. That's going to be a good game. So maybe Flyers fans will get a chance. There's a rumor Sam Morin might finally get in. I don't know. I haven't seen much of him since he's been drafted, but there's a chance. So keep your eyes open for that.
All right. This is the Blue Root Pod. The Blue Root Pod can be found on iTunes and Spotify. Also, check us out on the YouTube channel. And please be sure to check out Tyson's prospect article, which we'll be releasing at 10 a.m. I guess depends on when you're listening to this pod. But it'll be out shortly in a few hours. For Chris, for Tyson, thanks for listening, guys. Stay awesome. Go Flyers, baby.